This is the Pocket Micro, a new high-end Android-powered handheld from AYANEO. And considering it starts at a roughly $200 price point, it is actually one of the cheaper portables in AYANEO's dizzyingly growing lineup of devices. However, when you compare it to other similar kind of emulation-focused handhelds, which this very much is, it is actually a fairly premium way to play retro titles. But beyond kind of debating its price, what else does this horizontal handheld have to offer? Let's take a look. Well, the first thing we want to talk about is the name. It's called the Micro, and it's laid out in this kind of horizontal orientation, so it's something of a clear homage to Nintendo's late entry in the Game Boy lineup, the 2005 Game Boy Micro. Now, I actually wanted to grab a Game Boy Micro for my collection and use it as a kind of a point of comparison in this video, but a quick look on eBay revealed that these things now fetch a pretty penny. So instead, I've got this somewhat accurate printout of a Game Boy Micro to kind of give us a better idea of the scale that we're working with here. So as you can see, whereas the original Game Boy Micro was in fact rather small, this new device from AYANEO, although still pocketable, is a touch bigger. It's sporting a 3.5-inch 330 ppi display, whereas the Nintendo handheld from nearly 20 years ago had just a 2-inch screen. So yeah, this is Micro in spirit. Portable? Absolutely, and you can still fit it in your pocket, but I'd say it's probably better in your sling or backpack. Whilst we're talking about design, there is another little bit of gaming history that this handheld reminded me of, and that's the original Nintendo Entertainment System controller. That classic input device is somewhat notorious now for having rather hard corners, and this 2024 device from AYANEO is similarly blocky. There's no smooth ergonomic corners to be found here, it's a real rectangle of a handheld, and whilst I absolutely adore the look of this thing, the comfort isn't exactly something to shout about. I mean, it's a choice and one that kind of leans into the overall vibe of this device. I like it, and honestly, considering I've kind of been mainly playing GBA games in kind of like short stints during my playtime with this thing, I've really not found it to be an issue. Your mileage may vary here in regard to comfort, but on the whole, for me at least, it's not a deal breaker at all. So the device has an array of buttons and I/O. Let me talk you through the main ones and kind of what we've got here really quickly. First up on the front here, we've got your standard D-pad along with 4 somewhat small face buttons. There's also 2 kind of Hall effect joysticks. Again, they're a touch on the small side for my liking, but I guess that kind of comes with the territory of something rocking the kind of Micro name. The D-pad and buttons are fine. Nice feel to them, responsive, no issues really. And talking of buttons, if you hit the like button, you too will feel fine. The joysticks, however, I'm not a huge fan of. Firstly, the placement here isn't really ideal. I found myself on kind of like more than one occasion nudging into this left joystick when using the D-pad. It's kind of hard to avoid. Secondly, when you are using the sticks, I found you need to kind of like hold the device in a lower position. Otherwise, you have to kind of adopt this kind of crane stance. Again, they work fine. The sticks are responsive and they do the job, but it's not the most comfortable. Thankfully, I found myself primarily using the D-pad over the sticks, but if you're looking to use this for emulating kind of more modern retro stuff, then these sticks may not be what you're looking for. Also on the front here, we've got these 4 additional buttons kind of tucked away on the chin. It's here where you'll find what's essentially the kind of start and select buttons, along with 2 buttons for accessing AYANEO's AS-Space software layer, and another which is essentially kind of the Android home button. These are nice to have. They're all kind of out of the way, but within easy reach to either pause your game, tweak some settings, or jump back to the home screen. Now, on the top, we have 4 shoulder buttons, and they're all across a singular row. As you can see, we've got the L2 and R2 buttons. They're kind of slightly raised over the L1 and R1 counterparts, which kind of makes it a breeze to tell which is which without the need to look. Also on the top, you'll find a fan outlet, a volume rocker, and a power button with a built-in fingerprint sensor. Now, having this fingerprint reader definitely feels like a premium feature here, and it's nice to have when kind of authenticating stuff across Android, but during my time with the device, I found it a touch unresponsive and unreliable. Maybe it's just my fingers, who knows. Now, on the left side here, we've got the port for the micro SD card. Nice and easy way to upgrade the storage. I've got the base model of the Pocket Micro here, which comes with 128 gig internally. But should you want to add more, here's the place to do it. You access the slot by just kind of pulling down on this little plastic tab, which has its pros and cons. It's nice to have your SD card shielded away, protected and covered once inserted, but this little plastic flap is a bit stiff and can be a pain to kind of seat back in place flush. But to be honest, it's one of those things that you probably do so infrequently to not be annoying. It's once and done. So when it came to emulating games on this, the Pocket Micro could handle pretty much whatever I chucked at it, with a caveat that AYANEO's site states that this device can pretty much run up to PS2 level games. I tried out a range of Game Boy, GBA and N64 games. Yes, I like Nintendo, along with some GameCube titles and PlayStation 2 classics. Getting things up and running is the typical faff, lots of time spent getting things set up. The Android Play Store does have some emulators available directly, but things like RetroArch and ESDE you'll have to install directly. This is the bit I hate, it's tedious, but thankfully it's something you'll really only need to do once. Of course, it's an Android device, so that means it can pretty much play anything up on the Play Store too. Some games work better than others, especially considering it's a 3.5-inch screen, which may seem small by today's standards for touchscreens, but it's all generally pretty usable. This Pocket Micro is actually really well made. It's super sturdy, has no flex whatsoever thanks to the aluminium body. However, AYANEO's site oddly calls the Micro a delicate plaything, but it's far from it. It's a real tank. If you remember the Gulf War Game Boy, well, I reckon this portable from AYANEO could probably survive a similar beating. Now, let's talk specs. As I mentioned, I've got the base model here, which comes with 6 gig of RAM and 128 gigabytes of internal storage. You can also get a model with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gig of space. Of course, you can also upgrade your storage via the SD card slot. All models run on Android 13, connect via 5 GHz Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 5.2, and all use the NTK Helio G99 CPU under the hood. As I mentioned earlier, the 3.5-inch IPS screen results in a 960 by 640 image at a 3:2 ratio, which is perfect for GBA stuff, by the way. All Pocket Micro models come with a 2,600 mAh battery, which is charged over USB-C, which is a touch on the smaller side, but makes sense considering the size of this thing. That should get you between like 4 and 6 hours of playtime anyway, depending on what you're playing on this thing, of course. Like PS2 games don't last as long as GBA games, obviously. As for the weight, well, it's using aluminium and glass, so it has a little bit of heft to it. It comes in officially at 233 grams. I don't know, maybe my scales are off a little bit. But as for an everyday comparison, it ain't too far off the weight of my iPhone 16 Pro here. Now, one thing that is missing here is a headphone jack. There is no 3.5mm port to speak of, so if you want to listen on the go, then Bluetooth is the way to go. Honestly, the build quality and finish here is the real story of the Pocket Micro. AYANEO have crafted something that really does look the part. I love the design of this thing and have found myself picking it up alongside my phone when heading out, so I can sneak in a quick game or something whilst having a coffee or waiting in the car. It offers a level of portability that other handhelds of similar functionality can't match, so on size alone, it's a big win. If having a truly portable emulation handheld speaks to you, then this is an option well worth considering. That is until AYANEO offer up another one. If you are interested in grabbing one of these, then at time of recording at least, they are still available via Indiegogo, with prices ranging from around $200 to $250, depending on the model that you opt for. Eventually, the handheld should also be available via AYANEO's official site too. That's all from me today. If you've enjoyed this video, as ever, there's a button you can hit to let us know. Kevin is currently reviewing AYANEO's new DMG handheld, so if you want to see that review when it drops, be sure to subscribe. Ciao for now.